Tonight is incredibly, as you know, today in Georgia, there was a mass shooting at a high school, and it is a stark reminder of why we do the work that we do. Now, I am a comedian, I'm an influencer, but I'm also a mom. And so in these next 60 or so days, it's so incredible to work tirelessly to elect candidates across the board, up and down the ballot, who are going to pass laws, stricter gun laws, to ensure that our children are safe, to ensure that our families are safe. So that is why we all are here, to do the work that we do, but we also need to know how to talk to voters. And that means talking to our friends and family members, but also talking to strangers, which is something that people assume because I'm a comedian, I know how to do. But let me tell you, the first time I had to canvass, to door knock, I was like, oh my God, what do I say? How do I understand like the issues in a way that I can communicate them to people? That was something that, like, I'd been talking about politics for a while, but it can be very, very, very nerve-wracking. So if that's also you, then you are in the right place tonight, because we are going to hear from incredible people. Amick about relational organizing is here. We're going to hear from Brittany O'Grady, who you may have seen on White Lotus, a very active person in politics, who is going to talk to us about getting out the youth vote. We have Aly Eber and Leah Greenberg, who are going to be doing some role playing for us so we can actually see what it looks like. So I guess we're going to have to get our notebooks out and our pens and our pencils, because we're going to be learning tonight. Tonight is a learning evening. So without further ado, I do want to bring in Brittany. Brittany O'Grady is here.
Hey Maya, hey everybody. Thank you guys so much for having me. I'm honored to be a part of this call tonight. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, incredibly grateful that you're here. And we talked a little bit earlier before we came on, because we all were getting ready for this today, and obviously did not know what was going to happen in Georgia was going to happen, even though it's predictable at this point that back to school is also back to bullets, is what I said earlier. Can you talk a little bit about, because you're in Georgia, can you talk a little bit about your experience and how you're feeling today?
Yeah, I'm absolutely heartbroken, and it's I had been reflecting. I'm originally from Arlington, Virginia. I'm from outside the DC area, and I think I can remember since I was a child being afraid of gun violence. We had the DC sniper. I spent half of my childhood, my kindergarten year, doing indoor recess because we were afraid we were going to get shot. And I've had friends lose family members in mass shootings in movie theaters and colleges. And I think all of us have one degree of separation to somebody who has experienced gun violence. So, as you said earlier, today is a very harsh reality of where we are in our country. And I am now a Georgia resident, and we have very loose gun laws here that are very concerning. And every time I go outside, and I don't go outside as much as I wish, because I am afraid of gun violence. Every time there's a holiday, every time I want to go to a bar and see my friends, I am always on high alert. And that has been something that I'm 28 years old, and that's something that has been in my brain since I was probably 5. So I've just been reflecting. My heart is with the community, with the kids who are traumatized, with the communities who are probably feeling PTSD, who have experienced something like this, to the victims, and to the teachers as well. Nobody should be going to school, whether you're a faculty member, a teacher, or a student. Children shouldn't be afraid of their lives learning to have a future for themselves, and teachers and faculty shouldn't be afraid to be there as well and support children. It's heartbreaking.
Yeah, and I'm seeing all of the hearts in the chat, and this is something that impacts all of us, day in and day out, like you said. And we do want to make a difference. That is why we're here. So I'm going to hand it over to you so that you can talk about some of the work that you're doing and how we reach the youth, because they are incredibly important. But you are also, you lived in Virginia and in Georgia now, so you can also talk about the South. So I'm going to go ahead and hand it to you so you can share with everybody what you're working on.
Thank you guys so much. So my name is Brittany O'Grady. As you guys have probably heard already on the call, and I'm from Arlington, Virginia. I was born and raised there. And so I've spent the majority of my life in little blue bubbles in red states that kind of turn purple. My mother was a journalist. She covered Capitol Hill and politics when she was around my age. And she covered different politicians and presidents across the aisle. And then my dad still works in financial aid, making sure that people can afford to go to college and find a pathway through that. So my siblings, my older sister and my younger brother and I grew up in a very active space. Arlington's a very politically charged place, very progressive place in my experience. And as I got older and left the nest, I was finding myself in spaces that were more conservative, or people were brought up differently and maybe saw me as different for my identity or who I was or what I stood for. And that was a big challenge that I had, because I think all of us are so comfortable in our echo chambers. And so I'm really excited tonight to learn how to have these conversations that I've been trying to have for the past decade since I left home at 17, 18, and to continue to have progressive, positive, influential experience, conversations and experiences with people who might not see the way that we see things. And I think that one thing that I was raised on was always making sure that we're progressing forward as a country and as a community, and making sure that people of all different backgrounds have fundamental rights, and our freedoms shouldn't be repressed. We don't have to sacrifice someone else's rights to have rights, if that kind of makes sense. So we don't have to use other people as scapegoats. And so that's why I'm really excited to be here tonight, to learn how to have these conversations and to get a lot of people out of fear-based thinking, and also hopefully move the needle forward and continue to progress at a really important election. And that's why I think it's super important to vote blue, and to hopefully have conversations with people who, like my brother is going to be 20. It's going to be his first election. I know he's going to vote. And hopefully we can all have conversations with the youth, and also conversations with people that might shock us a bit on their views. So, yeah.
Thank you. Truly, actually, it's the shocking views that sometimes we don't realize that our closest friends and family have, that kind of catch us off guard when we do need to have those conversations. That just happened to me recently, where my friend's dad is going to be voting for Trump because that Tim Walz guy is just all about putting tampons in bathrooms. And I'm like, what conversation? How do I respond to that? So very much appreciate you being here and being a part of the movement. So thank you again, Brittany.
Thank you. Thank you, Maya.
Thanks. Next, I'm thrilled to welcome back Leah Greenberg. She's the executive director of Indivisible, and she's going to give us a training. So we talked about learning how to talk to voters. This is it. This is the meat of it right here. So Leah, there you go. Hey, Leah, how are you?
Hi there. Hello. It is a pleasure to be here tonight with such an incredible group of women. Thank you so much. Thank you all for joining us. We know you have a lot of places you could be with your Wednesday night, and it means a lot that you're here with us. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the whys of canvassing and the whys of organizing, and then I'm going to hand it over to Shay DeGolier who is going to, Indivisible's Director of Campaigns and Network Support, who is going to give us the masterclass in talking to voters. But just for like a little bit of background, if you are part of one of the action teams, we had over 500 action teams that have formed out of this call so far. We've been in direct touch with a bunch of you since then. We've been following up with resources, support, one-on-one conversations. If you're one of those folks, you may be sort of wondering like, okay, well, what is Indivisible and why do these people keep emailing me? So really quickly, Indivisible was founded back in 2016, right after Donald Trump was elected, because we saw hundreds of thousands of new people who have not been previously politically involved, and especially women who were shocked and outraged and wanted to organize, wanted to help answer this question, or wanted answers to this question: what do we do and how do we have an impact? And over the years, we have really defined our core mission as helping to move people who maybe were not politically engaged before, or maybe were not active politically before, into organizing and taking action and traveling with those folks on that journey. And we focus there for a really important reason. We think that the way we will save our democracy, the way we will win policies like reproductive freedom, like voting rights, like gun violence prevention, that can stop the next set of school shootings, it is not through political professionals. It is through regular people who are organizing within our own communities and networks, that we are the key collectively to building that power to change our country for the better. We think you specifically, you have that power and you can tap into it in your community if you know how. And in fact, we think you actually already have a ton of those skills, right? If you can run a PTA meeting, then you can run an organizing meeting. If you can organize your friends to go on a long weekend trip, then you can organize your friends to go on a canvassing trip. If your work involves having persuasion conversations with your colleagues, or sales or marketing, then you already probably have the skills to talk to voters inside of you. During this moment, we are seeing so many folks, right, especially women, who are so excited about Kamala Harris and who are asking the same questions about how to organize, how to be effective, that we have seen throughout our history. And we're really excited to make sure you get support you need on that journey. Now, like I said, back in our first call, we asked you to put together an action team. Over 500 people, 500 action teams have formed so far. We are still getting new folks registering every day. If you actually have a community that's taking action to Harris and you have not registered yet, we'll drop a link in the chat. Be sure to pop in there. But we've been hearing from so many of you offline, and we wanted to make sure that you understand who is on the other end of that. And so we're going to be bringing in Shay DeGolier, Indivisible's Director of Campaigns and Network Support, to help facilitate that. I'm going to do one quick additional thing, right? So I just want to say before Shay kicks off, it might be obvious when we do DVC, we are trying to reach people who already vote for us, right? Or we're trying to reach people who are maybe not going to vote, or they're maybe not going to vote for us. We're not trying to reach the people who are already on our team and who vote every time. The kinds of voters that we are trying to get, by definition, they're not people who have a huge amount of loyalty to or faith in political leaders or the Democratic Party, at least not so much that they consistently are voting. They might feel alienated or disengaged from politics. They might not trust politicians or political leaders, but they might trust a friend or a neighbor or a fellow member of their community. And that is where you come in. You become that authentic personal messenger who reach people that a TV ad might not work on. And unlike a TV ad or, a quick canvassing hit, you're going to be there after the election. And that means that you build deeper relationships that can move people and that can keep them in motion for the long term, because that is how we are going to win. Now, Shay is going to talk through a masterclass on the voters, and at the end, you're going to have a lot of material to work with, but I'll just say one more thing up front. One of the biggest fears that I hear from people who are getting ready to go out and talk to voters is that you're feeling like you're not enough of an expert, or you're not prepared enough, that somebody's going to stump you with a really tough policy question, right? I just want to be so clear. You do not have to ingest every policy paper on the internet or all of the latest political messaging to be an amazing communicator and persuader for voters, because your superpower is that you are a messenger in your neighborhood. Your superpower as a messenger in your neighborhood or your network, it's not that you know everything. It is that you are a real person who cares about this personally, who is impacted by this personally, who took the time out of your day to go and talk to other people. Because that is what you are, you have the power to make the kinds of people who tune out the ads, who tune out the politicians, think, maybe this is for me too. That is your superpower. That is what's going to help you lead others. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Shay, who is going to take us through the A's and Z's of voter contact.
Hello. Um, as she mentioned, my name is Shay DeGolier. I am the Director of Campaigns and Network Support at Indivisible, and I am so excited to be talking with you all tonight. Before I jump in, I also want to give a little shout out to all of the action teams that I've met with over the past few weeks. It's been so great getting to know all of you and working with all of you exactly on this, and I am really excited at the potential to get to talk to a lot more of you soon. I get so energized talking about voter contact, so I feel really grateful and lucky to be able to lead this section with you all tonight. Tonight, we're going to cover a bunch of different topics. We'll talk about why we talk to voters, types of voter outreach, how to overcome conversation anxiety, some components of successful conversations, and then some helpful persuasion tips. At the end, Leah and I will do a little role play so you can see what a conversation looks like. So let's dive in. Why do we talk to voters? The top reason is because it works. Face-to-face door knocking is proven to be the most effective way to reach voters, and neighbor to neighbor is even twice as effective. Door knocking makes the most impact out of all of the direct voter contact tools, but they're all valuable and have their own benefits. So some people might answer the door who wouldn't answer a phone if they didn't know the phone number. Some people might answer the phone that wouldn't read a political ad or a letter or a postcard. The types of voter outreach that we're going to talk about and dig into tonight is relational and direct voter contact. Relational outreach is exactly what it sounds like. It's centered on talking to people that we already hold some form of relationship with. That could be family, friends, coworkers, or neighbors. And direct voter contact, which we often just say DVC for, is a general umbrella term for having interactions directly with voters. So phone calls or knocking doors instead of an indirect method like a political ad on TV or social media. DVC is usually not relational in nature, so you're given a list of voters to contact based on a campaign strategy, which could be targeting specific geographic locations, a general list of low propensity voters, or any other combination of attributes that a campaign determines as a priority. Relational and DVC outreach are both really valuable and 100% necessary to be successful. On the relational side, people we hold relationships with are more likely to trust us or engage in conversation at all. On the DVC side, it's absolutely necessary to reach as many people as possible when the stakes are this high. So we need everybody to grab a list of strategic turnout priorities and make sure that the voters hear from somebody this election cycle. One of the reasons that our neighbor to neighbor program is so effective is because it combines both of these two things. It's strategically targeting a list of people, but you've likely had multiple interactions with them and you've had some level of connection to them, so they're familiar to you. Now, what is it like to do voter contact? Some of the common reasons that we hear for people not participating in canvassing is this fear about how a conversation might go. First, it's not as scary as it seems, and it's actually really, really fun. So to respond to this particular fear, I think it's helpful to think about a few things. The first one is weighing the risk versus the reward. So take a second to think about your community, your circle of friends, your family, your neighbors. What is the risk in approaching them to talk about this election? What is the worst thing that could happen? I'll tell you, it's that they disagree with you. That is the worst thing that could happen. Now, I want you to think about the reward of successfully moving through that conversation. And to be clear, success should be a reasonable expectation, meaning getting somebody to consider a different point of view, or getting somebody to fact check disinformation, or getting somebody to think about the consequences of the election in a different way. All of these outcomes are successful conversations or are a result of a successful conversation and are only possible if we take the risk to engage in that conversation. And I promise the accomplishment of getting through it and getting to that end is so worth it. The second thing to keep in mind, instead of letting your fear hold you back from engaging in this, is to remember that you are the best possible messenger for your own communities, for your own families, for your own friends. You do not have to be an expert to tell your neighbor down the street why you care about the outcome of this election, or to tell your coworker how much this means to you, or to ask a family member if they've been thinking about the election or if they're prepared to vote. You are going to be more successful just by being authentic and being relatable. The last thing that I think is helpful to help fight that little voice trying to scare us out of doing this is to understand that taking action can help us fight back against our anxiety. When we let our anxiety over the selection get to us, what does that look like? What do we do? It usually results in us doom scrolling or feeling hopeless, and then it's very hard to pull ourselves back together. So how do we avoid that feeling? We do something, which is what we've heard over and over and over in this campaign, is to do something. Push past your fear of the possibility of a tough conversation and use your anxiety to fuel your actions. Now, we've talked a little bit about why we should talk to voters, and we've talked a little bit about how to overcome some of our reservations. So what do we actually do when we have someone in front of us? There are so many ways to engage in one-on-one conversations, and there are a lot of different approaches to successfully move through them. For this call, we're going to condense it into 3 C's: contact, connect, and catalyze. When you go into voter conversations, you'll be given a script with talking points and an overall flow to help support you in your conversation, but you'll have to add your own flavor to it, and you'll have to be responsive to anything that people say at the door or on the phone. So what do each of these 3 C's mean? The first one, contact, is pretty simple. You just want to make sure that you have the right person. Because voter outreach is targeted and strategic, you're usually trying to reach a specific person from a list. So you want to confirm that you have the right person at the door or on the phone. And then you've completed the first step. Next, you want to try and make a genuine connection with them on a personal level. You want to find common values that both of you hold, and use that to build a connection and get them to open up with you. And then lastly, something should happen. The point of every conversation is to get them to move or act on your words. That can be getting them to change their perspective, or the ultimate goal of getting them to make a commitment to vote. Those 3 C's are built into every script, but like I mentioned, the exact words that you use are up to you and how the conversation is flowing. As a helpful framing, a script usually follows the lines of starting with a warm intro about who you are and why you're at the door. That could sound something like, "Hi, I'm Shay, and I'm out here volunteering with All In for Harris Action Team Florida." Then you'll move into like a pulse check or an opening question. It'll sound like, "Have you heard about this issue?" Then you'll do a brief pitch or a story about something you care about. The reason I decided to get involved and why I'm out here talking to you is because of X. Then you'll do another pulse check, but this one is intended to get them to speak to you, and by leading with curiosity. So you'll say, "Does anything that I just said resonate with you, or is there something else that you spend a lot of time thinking about that you'd like to talk to me about now?" And then finally, you'll close with an ask or a call to action. Something like, "Thank you for sharing that with me. I can tell we both really care about protecting our family's future. Will you vote for Harris in November? And will you ask 5 other people to vote as well?" Now, ideally, a conversation goes smoothly and you can just walk through the script like I just did. But sometimes the person on the other side or that you're talking to, you have the same shared values, but you have different perspectives on them. So I'm going to share a few helpful tips for moving through persuasion conversations. The first one is to slow down. Do not rush through it just to get through the conversation or to hit the next point on the script. Take your time, consider what points you think are valuable, and lean into those. Then listen to hear and not respond. Make a genuine effort to listen to their point of view and to understand where they're coming from. And share your views. Don't think that you have to hide how you feel or what your story is. Be respectful, but be real. Share your experience, name the impacts and the potential outcomes. Ask questions and invite them to share about their stances and their experiences. And then reflect and acknowledge. Repeat things back that you hear them say that you want to dig into, that you can find some common ground on, and then acknowledge fair critiques. And then once you've done all of those things, you want to end with the things that you've identified that you do have common ground on, and center on those to help them understand where you're coming from in a way that they might find relatable. Okay, we've reviewed a lot of voter contact conversation information, so I'm going to invite Leah back so we can show you what a version of this might look like. So I've just knocked on Leah's door and she answered, and we'll start. "Hi, I'm looking for Leah."
This is she. What can I do for you?
Hi, nice to meet you, Leah. My name's Shay, and I'm out here today volunteering with All In for Harris Indivisible, supporting Kamala Harris for president. Have you considered what's at stake in this election cycle and why it's important to participate?
Yeah, I haven't really had the time, totally honestly.
I understand. It's hard to track everything that's happening, and sometimes it can be really hard to follow everything. Are there any issues that you particularly care about?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, the cost of living is just getting way too high. Like everything just keeps getting more expensive.
I completely agree. I just had to move from my last neighborhood because life was getting way too expensive. I couldn't afford to stay there anymore with my little girl. Would you like to share more about how this is affecting you?
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. I've got two little kids as well. They're both in preschool right now. It just costs a fortune. And now my parents are moving in with us, and it just feels like everything's getting more expensive wherever you turn.
I completely understand. Like I mentioned, I have a kid as well. And that's one of the reasons I'm supporting Kamala Harris. She has plans to help parents with the cost of childcare and elder care. She plans to expand the child tax credit worth up to $6,000 for families with a newborn. That'll make it much easier to put money in parents' pockets.
Huh, that's interesting.
Right? And education is really important to me and my family as well. And that's why we want to make sure Donald Trump doesn't win this election and dismantle the Department of Education like it outlines in Project 2025.
What's Project 2025?
Oh my gosh, you haven't heard about it? It's a dangerous plan by Trump and his allies to roll back our rights and dismantle our democracy so he can act as an authoritarian leader. It's literally a 900-page document that outlines what he would do if he wins. And one of them is to defund a free lunch program in public schools.
That's really awful. I don't want that. What do I do?
Yeah, it's absolutely terrible. But luckily, there are a lot of ways that you can help. You can sign up to knock doors and talk to voters like I am now. You can host a letter writing party. You can make phone calls, or you can join our Women Wednesday calls. But most importantly, you can make a commitment to vote for Kamala Harris.
Okay, yeah. I mean, like I said, I got a lot of stuff on my plate, but I'll definitely think about it, and yeah, I mean, I'll be voting. I'll be voting for Harris.
Oh, that's so great to hear. And thank you for taking the time to talk to me today. I know that you're really busy. I just have one more question for you. Would you be able to reach out to 5 friends and make sure they're engaged in this cycle?
I mean, just like text my friends.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I can do that. I can do
Oh,
that.
great. Thank you so much. And I hope you have a good day.
You too. Thanks.
All right. Thank you, Leah, for joining me and helping me do that role play. So that's a good example of how a typical conversation might go. The easy part was the first C, just confirming that I had the right person and I'm speaking to the right person. And then it was a little bit challenging. I had to ask a couple questions to get her to open up. But then we were able to move through the conversation and end with her making a commitment to vote. I know we covered a lot of information in a very short time, so I want to remind all of the action teams that if you go to your last Friday action team email, there's a Calendly link, and you can schedule one-on-one time to talk with me or one of my colleagues if you'd like more support on having these conversations. If you're not an action team or a member of an action team, you can create one, and your confirmation email will have that same Calendly link to schedule a one-on-one time, if that would be helpful for you. Hopefully this helped you all feel a little bit more comfortable with the idea of reaching out to voters. If so, sign up for Neighbor to Neighbor and start knocking doors. And lastly, we covered a ton of the mechanics of talking to voters. So to address some of the messaging side, somebody's going to drop in the chat a couple documents. One will help talk about why we're all in for Harris, and the other one will help you learn a little bit more about Tim Walz. Thank you all for having me, and I hope to meet a lot more of you soon.
Thanks, Shay. Thanks, Leah. That was incredibly helpful and way more effective than what I like the impulse is to be like, what do you mean you're not voting? You've got to vote. It's important. It's your civic duty. It only takes a day of your time. So I like what you have, and I hope everybody has noted that in the chat and is headed to Calendly to grab that calendar time so they can get that training in. Thank you again. Next up, we have Aly Eber. She's a mom and attorney who, during a law of democracy class she was taking at UC Berkeley School of Law, she met a guy, as the story sometimes goes. And this guy later ran for Congress, and now he's running to be the next US Senator from the great state of Texas. Welcome, Aly.
Hey, thank you all so much for having me. Thank you, Maya, for the introduction. As Maya said, I'm Aly Eber. My husband is Colin Allred. He's a congressman from Texas who's running for Senate to defeat Ted Cruz. And I think that is a senator who is great to be knocking on doors and making calls about, because not a ton of people whose doors you knock on really love Ted Cruz. So that's actually a fun one. I really appreciate y'all having me here tonight. Like Maya said, I'm an attorney, I'm a mom, we have 2 little boys, and I had a day like a lot of you had today where I brought my kids to school, I rushed off to work, rushed back to pick up the kids, put them to bed, came downstairs still in my work clothes, hoping no one barges through the door. And it's a big thing that you're doing to be here. I want you to feel how important it is that you're here, that you're taking your time to step up and say, this election is too important to me to risk waking up on November 6th and having Donald Trump in the White House and Ted Cruz still in the Senate. And it matters when you talk to your neighbors. Maya might be a capital I influencer, a real life influencer, but you're an influencer in your community. You're the person who convinced your friend to buy an air fryer. You're the mom who was like, I know the nose Frida is weird, but trust me, it really works. You gotta buy it. You're an influencer in your spaces. You're an influencer in your town, in your neighborhood, at your workplace, in your friend group. And there is no substitute for that. And so the fact that you're here and you're getting engaged in this really fundamentally important way is so inspiring and so important. And I really appreciate you all letting me jump in and talk to you all today. I want to tell you a little bit, I'll tell you a little bit about me, a little bit about the Senate race in Texas, and why it's also really important if you are a supporter of Vice President Harris and want to see her have a successful administration. So Colin is a 4th-generation Texan who was born and raised in the district that he represents now. And he has always been the kind of guy who really wants to get things done. And what that means when you're a member of Congress is being the type of member of Congress who's thinking about what your community needs instead of how you score political points, who's thinking about the families today who, after I dropped off my kids at work, at school, like many of you, I got to work. And the first thing that I saw is news of a absolutely horrific shooting at another school. And what that makes me want is leaders who don't just talk the talk of freedom, but walk the walk of freedom, who know that when we are nervous to send our children to school, when we're nervous to go to the movies, when we're nervous to go to a bar, when we're nervous to go to a fair, when we're nervous to leave our homes, that's not freedom. Who also know that when we can't make our own decisions about our own reproductive health care, that's not freedom either. Colin and I had 2 babies in Texas in the last 5 years. They are hopefully going to sleep upstairs while we have this call. And I was really lucky because I had healthy pregnancies, I had healthy babies, but a lot of families are not as lucky as I was. And in Texas right now, there are functionally no circumstances, vanishingly few circumstances, in which you can obtain an abortion. And that includes situations where the mother's health is at risk, the mother's life is at risk, where pregnancies are not viable, where the delay or the impossibility of getting that health care is making future pregnancies impossible because it's harming women's reproductive systems. And they are no longer able to do what some of these Republican leaders say they want families to do, which is have kids. And they're saying, I want kids, but my state is preventing me from exercising my freedom. And we need leaders who are just going to turn on some common sense sometimes, who are going to say that having safer communities who don't worry about gun violence is an important aspect of freedom, who say that allowing women to make their own healthcare decisions and trusting women to make their own decisions and to make those decisions with their doctors and their loved ones and their faith and their families is appropriate. And it is not a place where we need lawyers and hospital administrators. And goodness gracious, I have traveled all over Texas on these Southwest flights watching Brittany in White Lotus on Southwest. Thank goodness they added that. It has saved me many boring flights. But as I've traveled around Texas, I am yet to meet a woman who says, yeah, I really wish Ted Cruz were in the doctor's office with me. And we deserve leaders who trust women, who trust us, who know that we can make our own decisions. And we can have those leaders when we do things like what you're doing tonight, which is stepping up, learning how to get involved, learning how to get organized. And Colin is a leader like that. He's a leader that fights for Texas families. He's a leader that trusts women. He's a leader that fights for real freedom, freedom that allows us to live our lives how we want to live them and pursue the dreams that we want to pursue and the dreams for our children that we want to pursue and the dreams that they want to pursue. And it's so important to be investing our time and our energy in the next 60 some odd days in doing these and having these fundamental conversations with our friends and neighbors. And so I'm really appreciative you all have me here today. I will say that one of the most important things that we can do, in addition to electing Vice President Harris, is giving her an opportunity to have a successful administration. And that means giving her a Senate majority. So that means electing Colin to the Senate. It means giving her a majority in the House of Representatives that allows her to confirm judges who believe in the rule of law. It means giving her the opportunity to confirm people to work in her administration, to not have this logjam in Washington that I know drives all of us crazy, where you're thinking, we elected everybody to go run the government. Why can't they get anything done? Where we see horrific shootings and we say, why can't they pass a bill? Why can't they make some common sense changes that have very broad support? We need to give her the votes to do that. And one of the ways that we can do that is by flipping a Senate seat in Texas and getting rid of Ted Cruz, who is one of the biggest barriers to achieving, frankly, anything. He doesn't actually want to do much of anything. And so it is a great way to get involved. And like I said, when you call people on the phone, when you're phone banking in Texas, or you knock on a door in Texas, there are very few conversations you have where people say, oh, but Ted Cruz, I just love him. So that's a fun one. And you can get involved in our campaign by going to colinallred.com, 1 L in Colin, 2 L's in Allred. And that will help make a big impact this year in the election, where we can wake up on November 6th and say, we did that. And that is such a better feeling than the awkward feeling you might feel where sometimes you knock on a door and you think, oh no, that one was awkward, that one was weird. But that's worth it, because you wake up on November 6th and you know that you did that. You made that change. It was you. And that is such a good feeling. If I don't wear out a pair of sneakers by November 6th, by the day after the election every year, I think I didn't leave it all in the field. So I am well on my way to wearing out a pair of shoes. I'm going to wear them out. I'm doing it with you. And you are taking the first step by being here. So thank you so much for having me. It's so great to talk to you all. You are doing an amazing thing. This is such a great group of women. I will turn it back over to Maya, but thank you so much for having me. It's been great to see all of you.
Thanks so much, Aly. It's an important messaging point, because sometimes people do forget that Kamala Harris can't do it alone, that she needs that seat flipped. We don't want to hear from Ted Cruz anymore, ever. So please, everyone, make sure you are following Colin Allred's race and contributing to everything all the work that they are doing. This has been very energizing. So thank you, Aly. And now we want to make sure that you leave here knowing that you can talk to voters everywhere. And so it's sometimes formalized like door knocking and phone baking. But there is an underutilized tool. It's called relational organizing. And Emily Amick is here, a good friend of mine and a former counsel to Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer. Now, she's known to many for her huge social media following, as she is Emily in your phone and an Emily out of the phone on the weekend. And maybe you've read her book, and that's motivated you to be here, Democracy in Retrograde, which is now a New York Times bestseller, right, Emily?
Yeah.
All right, awesome. Well, you are all about using your political insider insight to help people find ways they can take action. So I'm going to let you take it away and talk about Ripple.
Thank you so much, Maya. And we're going to do a presentation here today. So as Maya said, I am Emily in your phone. I'm on Instagram and Substack. Please find me there. And also, I'm the co-author of the book Democracy in Retrograde, which if you are trying to find your place in this world of civic engagement, you're trying to find hope, it's a really great, easy read to help you build that pathway. Ripple is something I've been working on to leverage your personal relationships to help get this election moving. And it's not just about, it's about electing Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, but it's also about all those races like Colin Allred's race and all those other critical races down the ballot. If we could go to the next slide. Great. So, you know, our banner statement here, 50% of your friends didn't vote in 2022. This is, of course, a grand statement, but so many people that you know probably didn't vote last cycle. They might be registered, they might not, but typically we're finding huge numbers of people aren't registered. And so one of the things that we do with Ripple is it's a way for you to find out if your friends and family are registered to vote, if they voted, and then we're going to give you personalized talking points that you could just copy paste and use as a script to send a text message about the issues that are actually on their ballot. Next one, please. So relational organizing is this idea of talking to people you know about what's on their ballot, about what's at stake in this election. And a text from a friend increases the likelihood to vote by 8%. It's a hugely effective way of getting out the vote. Next slide. Ripple is a program, and if you go to ripplevote.org, I'm going to walk you through the sign up, but you can look at it now. And the idea of Ripple is we have two different methodologies. There's the website where you can sign up, but influencers, someone like me or someone like Maya, can have their own Ripple page. And this is the first time we are taking relational organizing and we're trying to scale it through social media. It's an experiment. We are building it as we go. It's a very startup culture, which is fun and exciting for me. But the goal is to figure out how we can use these parasocial relationships and these really effective large-scale communications programs to scale relational organizing, which is the most effective form of organizing that we can do. Next slide. So I'm just going to jump right in to let you know how to get started with Ripple. Next. And I know it's really late for those of us on the East Coast, so I'm trying to go quick. So the first thing is if you can go to ripplevote.org and you click sign up. That is next. That's going to bring you to a sort of it's a multi-tiered sign up method. The goal here is to make it easy for you to sign up without a password, but this magic link system is messing up a little bit. There's a quick form you fill out, and then you have to sort of re-enter your email address, and you're going to get the magic link sent to your email, which will allow you to sign in to, and the underlying tech is called Rally. It's going to allow you to sign into Rally. Next. Once you're in Ripple, you're going to be able to match yourself to the voter file. What we use in this program is public data that already exists. So you're not going to be like uploading your contacts from your phone. You're not downloading an app, none of that stuff. You're just searching within the publicly available databases. So the first thing you're going to do, match yourself to the voter file and double check that your registration is okay. I actually have a friend of mine who was testing this out for me, and she's in a battleground state, and she found that her registration was out of date. She wasn't registered, which was totally wild because she hadn't moved, nothing had changed. But it's really important to double check that you are yourself registered to vote. Next slide. Then you add your contacts, and we're asking people to add 5 contacts, and you don't need to know tons of detailed information. You just have to know their name, their city, and their age range. And I'll say, like, you can guess their city. I've put in some people that I'm not really sure about, and it still finds them in the voter file. Next. Once you add your contacts, you're going to get personalized scripts to send them text messages based on what's actually on their ballot. And we've put in over 100 scripts into the program for all of the key battlegrounds races across the country. So those are Senate, House races, some governor's races, some key state legislative races in places like Arizona and New Hampshire, where we're possibly going to be able to flip the balance of the legislature, Pennsylvania. These are really the key races that are going to decide the future makeup of governments that are going to impact all of our laws, including those on gun violence. My background is I was a counsel to Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, and I was actually staffed with the gun portfolio. So I have worked on a lot of these federal legislative issues and have been doing this for almost 20 years at this point. And the only way we are going to see really serious movement on the gun violence issue beyond the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act, which was of course passed in 2022 by the Biden administration, is if we have a Democratic Congress, Democratic Senate, Democratic House, and a Democratic presidency. And so it's so critical. Up here, we have an example of the Arizona race for Ruben Gallego, a really, really critical battleground race in a battleground state that also has an abortion ballot measure. And I should mention, we also have all of the abortion ballot measures included as talking points within the program. Next slide. So I call this the side quest in Ripple, which is when you add a contact, you can see their voting history and you can find out if they are voting regularly. I have a friend that I looked in and I found out he hadn't voted since 2020. And I sent him a quick text message just to find out, like, oh, are you excited about November? What's your plan? Like, what are you thinking? And a few questions usually gets the conversation started. And then in Ripple, we have tons of advice for different things you can say based on what that person cares about. Next slide. And one of the really fun things about this program is you're able to see your personal impact. So you're able to go into your data and find out exactly how many contacts you've entered and if you've been able to match them and what that is. If you're an influencer and you have your own influencer page, those folks are actually going to be able to get their data at the very end and find out what is that influencer's impact, which is really exciting when we think about the broader role of social media and politics. We're all sort of wondering, how do we translate, as Maya says, the vibes to votes? And this is our way to measure how we're doing that. And then last slide. So if you have a moment to go to ripplevote.org, if you haven't already, to sign up, you can go and be a little voyeuristic and see what your friends are up to, if they've been voting, enter in a few people and get some scripts. You can find us on IG at ripplevote, and you can always email us with any questions that you have. It's ripple@forfactsake.com. It's not ripplevote. That's wrong. But yeah, that is the end of the presentation.
That was absolutely fantastic and incredibly helpful, Emily. And it's funny, we follow each other and I talked about Ripple, but I wasn't quite sure what Ripple was. And so I think it goes to show that we can't assume that people know what's going on. We can't assume that our friends and family are voting. We can't assume if they're voting or not voting, why they're doing the things that we do. And so it is about having those conversations and those relationships. And I'm excited to use the tool. And I hope everybody is signing up and doing the things right now so that they can have those conversations. So thank you so much. We are coming to a close. We're actually ending pretty much on time. I just want to wrap a little bit by talking about, as a comedian, one of the things that we have to do is read the room. And maybe some of you have heard that before. And that's having an understanding of the vibe, of the energy. And so when you are going into these conversations with people, it's not just talking to voters. It's, as we saw in one of the slides, it's listening. And sometimes it can be difficult to do that because in our minds, it's obvious. Sometimes it's like, why do I have to explain why you need to vote for Kamala Harris? It's like having to explain that, like, oh, you should breathe air or you should drink water. It seems like an obvious thing. And so it's only when we allow things to quiet down a little bit and we listen, and so that we can actually hear from our friends and family or those strangers that were door knocking, to really hear what is going to engage them. Because at the end of the day, these are all just conversations, and bringing back the art of conversation and being able to truly connect with people on a human level. Because at the end of the day, we all do kind of have the same values, which is like, we want what's best for our children. We want what's best for our families. And so in order to get there, we have to sometimes quiet down and have those conversations. And so reading the room and then being present in those conversations. So it's not about racing from one to the next one to the next one, and understanding that maybe the conversation, especially with friends and family, it's not all going to happen in one conversation. It might take 2 or 3. And so you can like pop in, hey, how you doing? Maybe they don't, I kind of like to drop the stuff in the chat, like, hey, are you excited about November? And just leave it at that and see, and kind of like lead them on a thing. And then maybe on a different one, say like, I'm so excited about voting for Kamala Harris and this is why. Or did you see this in the news today? This is interesting. And so coming up with fun ways, it's the always be closing those voting conversations. Always, if you remember Coffees for Closers, I'm like, democracy is for voters. And so we need to make sure that people are engaging in an ongoing way as we get through the next 60 or so days. So I want to thank everybody for being here this evening. I know it's late for everybody on the East Coast, but this is incredibly exciting. Oh, we got takeaways. Next steps. The slide's up. You guys, you're going to have to practice, lots of practicing. Sign up to talk to voters in your area. Yes, even if that means, knocking on the doors of your neighbors, that's what you're going to have to do. And the next call is September 11th. We're going to learn about voter registration, because guess what? Can't vote if you're not registered to vote. And those deadlines are approaching fast in a lot of these swing states. So please make sure you're doing that. Thank you again for everyone for being here, for Liz and Shannon for organizing these in the first place. And everybody have a fabulous night.